It is working. Hooray! All right, so we are up to chapter 9 of Ketubot. We are sailing through some very complicated material, and even if you're not understanding everything, I hope you're at least getting a general appreciation for the style of how the arguments are presented and how the law is being laid out. Chapter 9, we're going to get down to some more nitty-gritty of the economics between husband and wife, and one of the things we're going to see is that what you say matters. If there's a lawyer in the room, they will tell you that if you write a contract, the words of the contract are usually considered more important than what you meant by the words in the contract. Doesn't mean you have to be a strict constructionalist, because there is some leeway for what is a rational, objective interpretation of something. But if you didn't write it, the contract probably isn't going to cover you, right? So if I say, I want you to paint my house, and you come and you paint only the garage, there's a problem because you didn't fulfill the contract of house. But if I say, I want you to do some painting for me, and you come and paint my garage, but I meant paint the whole house, then chances are you're the one, the homeowner, who's in trouble because you did not make it clear what you meant by what the target was. Does that make sense? Just a very simple example. It's going to get more complicated. We're good? Good. All right. So in our usual way, we're going to begin on the left and then just swoop around. If you wouldn't like to read out loud, you just look at the other person to your left and we pass it along.
If a husband writes to his wife, I have no claim whatsoever upon your property, he may enjoy its use effect during her lifetime, and when she dies, he is her heir.
He is her heir. All right. So on the surface, this might be like, wait a minute. He said, I have no claims on your property. Because look what he said. He just said, I have no claims on your property. But on the dividends of your property, on the produce of your property, that I might have a claim to. And when you die, I would have a claim to your property as your heir. So he didn't say those things explicitly. And so those things, because those are the natural default positions of the relationship economically that was had in the ancient world, those are assumed to remain as the default in this relationship. Right? He changed one part of it. He didn't change the rest of it. So what part did he change is our next question.
If so, why might he have written to her, I have no claim whatsoever upon your property? Right?
I mean, if I say I have no claim on your property, it sounds like I have no claim, but you just told me that two of the biggest claims, the produce and the inheritance, I still have. So what was I giving up when I made this statement? Go ahead and finish that, and then we'll come back to the comment.
That if she sold it or gave it away, her act is valid.
All right. So what he is saying when he makes the statement, I have no claim on your property, is that if she wants to dispose of her property however she feels like, he won't stop her. So it's definitely her property, and he is allowed to sell it. She is allowed to sell it. She is allowed to give it to someone as a birthday present, whatever she wants to do, and he can't stop her. But as long as it remains in her possession, he can still enjoy the dividends. He can still enjoy it as an inheritance. Natan.
Very consistent with what we learned last week.
Yep. Exactly.
If she has an obligation of a piece of land, she can have the land, but he can lose the fruit or what is in the trees and everything that produces land.
Dividends. Yeah. Usufruct is just such an annoying English word.
Yes.
Rabbi,
yes.
Remember how you said there were no lawyers? Did they have transactional lawyers?
No. If you wanted, so it was like.
Would the rabbi do the transaction stuff?
Well, so if you wanted to put together a template for how you should word things, then you could certainly consult with a sage, one of the rabbis or the students of the sages. So how do I word this so that I'm covered in these cases? And then they would explain, well, if what you're saying is that you want to let her still be able to sell it if she wants, then say it like this.
So they couldn't draft it for you, huh?
There wasn't exactly a formal draft, but I mean, I suppose they could have had somebody draft it up. But it was mainly in the cases when people were presenting to the Beit Din that the rabbis were very anti-lawyer, because as a profession, that person was usually using the wording to their client's advantage rather than to the advantage of the truth. This is the way you have to give your case. This is the way you should present the facts, because that will trip, these rabbinic red lines and make them respond. And that was what the rabbis didn't want. They didn't want coaching of the witnesses. They wanted people to just come and be honest about what they knew about whatever the situation was. So if you wanted to ask someone advice about how should I make a contract, you can always ask advice. All right, part 2.
If he wrote, I have no claim whatsoever upon your property and upon their produce, he may not enjoy the use effect during her lifetime, but when she dies, he inherits her.
All right, so now he's added, I don't have your property and I don't have the produce, meaning the dividends. And indeed, bing, that works. Now she can sell it if she wants or give it away, and he has no claim to the dividends of the fruit that's being grown on it either. So if he adds that extra phrase, now he has covered that extra area, right? So you see, the way you make your statement actually makes a big difference. Rabbi Yehuda is going to push back a little bit.
What happens if he's not in writing only that's 2 witnesses?
As long as you have 2 witnesses, it is still enough. Yes. But writing is always a little bit clearer, and witnesses, right? Writing without witnesses is still not great, but writing and witnesses is the ideal. That's why we do the ketubah the way we do.
Yeah, but witnesses alone without writing is also kosher.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And choose the minimum.
2 is the minimum. Although, we'll see how far we get tonight. But 2 is the minimum for legally deciding a case. But 1 witness in certain circumstances can lean a case in certain directions. But 2 witnesses for making a final decision are what you need. Part 2a.
Rabbi Judah says, he may in all cases enjoy the use effects from the use effect, unless he wrote to her, I have no claim whatsoever upon your property and upon its produce and the produce of its produce, and so on without end.
All right, so Rabbi Yehuda wanted to be extra careful. It's not actually necessary, but he wanted to point out that just because he made no explicit claim to the produce, maybe he meant the produce of the produce, right? So I don't have any claim to your grapes, but maybe I have a claim to the seed of the grapes, right? Or the wine, or other things that come out of this, right? I don't have any claim to the wheat, but I do have claim to the chaff, or I do have claim to something else, right? So the idea is he wanted to cover all the bases by saying, I don't have any claim to anything that comes from your property, even if it is a derivative dividend of the original produce. Yep.
The question of one of the dividend, I don't know if dividend is the right word, but one of the things would be money from the produce if it gets sold, right? Rabbi Yehuda was saying if the grapes got sold, you were entitled to the money.
Well, that was his concern,
right.
Was that what your produce turned into could also be something that he could have a claim to, because it wasn't the original produce. And that's what he's trying to head off. But the general understanding is that just saying its produce was enough to cover it. And then part 3, we're now going to get into the argument about how to cover everything.
If he wrote, I have no claim whatsoever upon your property, its produce, and the produce of its produce during your lifetime, and after your death, he may neither enjoy its produce during her lifetime, nor does he inherit her when she dies.
All right, so according to the sages, the general rule is if you want to make sure that the husband won't get a single penny, a single pruta from any of his wife's property, not when she's alive, not from its dividends, not from when she's dead, this is the way he needs to say it. Right? He needs to say, I get no claim on the property, no claim on the produce, and no claim on anything in your lifetime or after your death, right? It's just absolutely ad infinitum. I don't get to touch any of it. Okay? Sounds like it's pretty ironclad, right? Great. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is going to push.
When she dies, he inherits her because by his declaration, he is making a condition which is contrary to what is written in the Torah. And whenever a man makes a condition which is contrary to what is written in the Torah, his condition is null and void.
Okay, so
Where in the Torah say that the husband do
okay, so it does say that a husband inherits the wife, but I don't remember the exact chapter and verse.
really say that?
Yeah, but the difficulty here is that according to the Gemara and the Talmud, the Torah verse is not actually saying it directly. The Torah verse is saying it indirectly, and it's what's called an asmachta. In rabbinic literature, there are words and verses that are proof texts, that are the actual derivative, where we get the idea of the mitzvah from. And then there are other texts that we already have the idea of what the principle or the rule should be. And then we find a support text that seems to agree with that principle. And according to the Gemara, this is one of those cases. So ultimately, the law does not go according to Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, kind of. It goes in a way that is similar, which is, I'll do my best to give the short interpretation, which is to say the Torah doesn't say that the woman inherits, that the husband inherits from the woman. The rabbis say the husband inherits from the wife, because there is a supporting verse, not a proof, but a supporting verse, an asmachta in the Torah to that effect. However, because that is a rabbinic position, then there is still the concern that we don't let him void a rabbinic rule. And so we have to work out more carefully how he can set aside that rabbinic position. I probably just lost everything. But that it's complicated, that you would have to work it out in extreme detail to try and work it out. But it is possible, yes, to come up. It is possible to write out a very specific set of conditions that prevent him from inheriting and from touching the property altogether.
Also, if he's against the Torah.
But it's because it's not against the Torah. It's against a rabbinic proposition that is supported by the Torah, but not established by the Torah.
Here's a number 27, verse 11. And he shall inherit from her.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going off how the Gemara interprets. So this is why we don't derive halakha directly from the Mishnah in the modern day, because we've got 2,000 years worth of discussion that has digested the text for that period of time. But it is possible to set up a proper set of conditions that will allow her to retain full use of property and for it to be inherited by someone other than her husband. It's just very complicated to do so. Okay, we'll leave that there. And thank you for the footnote again. Okay, Ketubot 9:2. We're going to get more complicated financial arrangements.
A man died and left a wife, a creditor, and heirs, and he also had a deposit or a loan in the possession of others.
Okay, time for a diagram. Because inheritance law, right? I hope everybody understands that one of the things that can cause no end of grief within a family and community is somebody dying and more than one person wants the assets, right? If someone dies, fighting over their money is a great way to tear a family apart. That's what we're dealing with here. Because again, as I keep saying every week, in an ideal world, everybody involved would sit down, they would talk, they would compromise, it would all get worked out. This is not the ideal world. This is going to court. All right, so we have the dead guy. Right. I'm not an artist, okay? So we've got the dead guy. Now, the dead guy had lent money to someone else. Okay, he had lent money to someone else. So that means there is an outstanding loan against his estate. So there is a credit that's meant to be coming back, right? We'll put that in red, right? That this is supposed to be coming back to his estate as a net positive to the value of his estate. Everyone with me so far? Okay, but we have the heirs, right? Those are his kids, right? We've got his wife, right? And she's got her ketubah, that's the K. And we've got creditors. I don't have a good picture for them. What's a creditor? Oh, I know. We'll do Monopoly, right? The top hat. Right? So the bankers, and the Monopoly guy with the top hat. We'll put a little monocle, right? So he's the evil banker, waiting for his money. So he's dead. He has his estate, right? This is all of his money and assets. And the question is, who gets this coming in, right?
That doesn't go like in order, like first the Ketubot, and after that the creditors, and then what left over.
You're trying to jump to the end of the game. We have to play the game first. Are you like this when you do football? Right? I don't want to watch the game.
No.
Just give me the score.
No, because I like to have a conversation with the text.
Yes. So you're asking the right question, which is, okay, how do we order who has priority, right? So let's imagine that there's only enough money to pay off one of these people, right? Or maybe enough money to pay off two of these people, right? How would we prioritize who gets what from the inheritance? That's the question that they're dealing with. And it's specifically talking about this movable property. Remember, land, there's different issues because the Ketubot in particular was a lien against his fixed property, his dirt property. But the movable property, we don't have that same rule that everything is set aside for the Ketubah. So it's a little bit more free-floating in this case because we're talking about this money coming back into the estate. We're all good? Okay. So Rabbi Tarfon gives one interpretation.
Rabbi Tarfon says, it shall be given to the one who is under the greatest disadvantage.
Okay. So we ask who is the person who is the greatest disadvantage,
The wife.
That's
My point.
right? And that's who should be getting it, right? Who needs it most, almost, as a way of putting it. Okay, that's nice. But Rabbi Akiva pushes back.
Rabbi Akiva says, we do not show mercy in the matter of law.
All right, let's just pause and savor that particular topic. All right, we do not show mercy in a matter of law. Sounds harsh, right? But he's actually making a very important statement, which is to say we don't interpret the law to be nice. We interpret the law to be fair. You can be nice on your own time. You can be nice on your own dime. You can be nice when working at a compromise and sitting down and discussing this. But if it comes to the court and we have to follow the law according to the law, that isn't going to give us any room for being kind. And in fact, there's a general principle that is, as long as there is strict justice, there is no compassion. And as long as there is strict compassion, there can be no strict justice. Right? That you have to give a little compassion if you want to have full justice, because people get what they deserve, not with the little extra cushion that we might give with kindness. And in the same way that if you want to have strict justice, you can't have any compassion at all, because otherwise it's not following the precise formula of the law. So he's telling the Rabbi Tarfon, I don't care who's at a disadvantage. All I care about is what does the law say? Because if it comes to the court will decide it according to the law, not according to the court's heart. Make sense? And this may seem harsh, but it is the unfortunate situation. I'll point out that there's another very famous story where a decision like this was happening. And the decision was that the wealthy man deserved the money and the poor person did not deserve the money. And one of the judges was arguing that they should settle it to give the poor man the money. And the other member of the court said, no, we can't do that. The claim is correct. The rich person does deserve the money according to the law. Pay him, and then we will do tzedakah to the poor person. Right? We can't take from the rich person through the law to do kindness and tzedakah for the poor person, but we can do tzedakah personally to help that poor person. So you don't turn the court into an instrument of social engineering, good modern term. You don't use the court and the law to do that. You use the other parts of Judaism to do that. Once you're in the court, it's by the book. And so by the book, Rabbi Akiva says, this isn't the way we play. Instead, Rabbi Akiva argues, if you could continue.
Rather, it shall be given to the heirs, for whereas all the others must take an oath, the heirs need not take any oath.
Okay, oath taking. We might as well talk about it now because it's going to be a big issue for the rest of this chapter. So in order to understand who has a stronger claim, one of the measures is to say who has to prove their claim by taking an oath. And in certain circumstances, the Torah and rabbinic law says that this person needs to swear that they have a claim to this money, right? And in both the case of the wife for the ketubah and the creditors, they would have to swear in front of the court that indeed they have a right to this money, that they have not collected their money that they're due yet, that they are due money at all. They're going to have to make those
And
claims.
also they have in writing both cases.
But that is not just that they have it in writing. They also have to make a claim against this money coming in and a claim that they didn't receive any money yet. Right. So let's say, for example, that the other people might say, yeah, but his wife already got half of her ketubah when we sold the property. And now we didn't have enough for the full ketubah, so she hasn't got the rest of it. She would have to swear, yes, I did receive half, but I haven't received the rest. Right? There are many claims that can only be established sometimes by a person swearing an oath. Now, in the modern world, unfortunately, most people don't care what you swear. Right? We like, oh, you're going to promise me. I promise you I paid back the $10. What do you mean? Show me a receipt, right? If I don't see a receipt, I don't care what you swear. In the ancient world, your oath did matter in many cases because sometimes that was the only evidence we could have. Right? We didn't have video cameras, we didn't have bank statements, and we didn't have credit card receipts. Sometimes the best you could hope for, if you didn't have witnesses, was to have the person swear. And people did generally take their oath seriously. And this was a deterrent to weed out people who would be lying. So what Rabbi Akiva is saying is the heirs, because they are his kids, by default, everything from the estate goes to them. So they don't need to swear anything because they get 100% if there's no other issue going on here. Whereas these two are going to have to make oaths. So since they have a weaker position, then this money should go to the heirs. Now, if there is still then a claim against the estate, they can petition to the heirs to then get the money out of the estate at that point. But they can't get it directly through the court because the court is not free to hand over this extra money to either of the other two people who have a debt from the estate.
Can I be Nader Chutzpan and disagree with Rabbi Akiva?
You disagree with Rabbi Akiva?
Yeah.
I'm used to you disagreeing with Rabbi Hillel and liking Shammai, but
No, because my judgment is different.
okay.
Because let's say that there is a contract, an obligation between three parts with the state, correct? With the owner, the original one before pass away.
Right.
So when he passed away, first you need to fulfill the obligation that he had with the people under contract. So the first obligation is by Ketubah, that the Ketubah is a contract with the wife to pay. The second obligation is with the creditors to pay. After he cleaned all the debts, everything, whatever left, is go to the heirs as natural, perfect.
Right.
But first you need to clean all the obligation from the fleeing.
Right.
Perfect.
But it is the question that you're dealing with here that is a little confusing in the modern world, is that in the ancient world, in the classic world, is movable property was not usually used to secure a debt. That wasn't usually considered your base security. Your dirt property was your security. So there isn't an expectation automatically that his estate has to use the movable property to pay them off. So that is why the heirs are higher in the hierarchy of who should have first dibs on the property. Now, if there still is an outstanding debt to the estate, then they can try to petition the court to say, hey, now that the estate has money, this still needs to be used to help us through the movable property, but they don't have a claim directly on that movable property at that stage. So that's, you're right. In the modern world, we consider movable property and dirt property to be all assets, and it's all one big bundle. That wasn't the way it was viewed in the classical text. So,
how are they able to go after the heirs? Because I thought once the heirs inherited the money, they could no longer go after the heirs.
Well, it wouldn't automatically happen. That's why they can't petition to the court, but they can still say that there are outstanding debts against the estate.
Right, but the state's already been dissolved by moving all the money to the heirs, right? Well, at least through the movable products. They can't go through the movable product because that's already been given to the heirs.
So this is why it would continue in court for some time until the rabbis decided whether or not there was grounds for using movable property to pay off these debts or not. But then you get into more of the particulars. But we can't really get down into the weeds of how the additional court settlements can happen for credit.
So they could actually take the money from the heirs and give it to the creditors of the wife.
Well, they wouldn't be taking it from the heirs, although kind of, which is also, sensitive of how we deal with property that is held by orphans, but they would be still taking it from the, in quote, estate. But trying to work out what there was and wasn't a lien against is very particular work that I don't want to get into the weeds of. I just wanted to make sure that people understood that there could be a potential resolution. It's not automatic that these other people would get it, but there could be a potential resolution. Okay. And now in Ketubot 9:3, we're going to get something a little bit similar.
If he left produce that was detached from the ground, whoever seizes it first acquires possession.
All right, you may remember this idea, that something that was already loose from the ground, just loose apples sitting on the ground, could potentially, in certain circumstances, be first come, first served. All right, whoever grabs it, and then it becomes theirs. All right, so that is the general rule we have here. Again, we're not talking about random strangers. We're talking about people who do have a claim to some value from his estate. Right? You do owe me money, and I'm going to take these apples to cover what you owe me. That's where we're working with here. We're good? Okay. Part 2.
If the wife took possession of more than the amount of her ketubah, or a creditor of more than the value of his debt, the balance.
The balance is the question, right? So here we have, the different issue where it's no longer somebody else holding the money, but now it is the bag of apples. Right, those are apples, my best apple drawing, right? And so somebody has grabbed it because they're allowed to grab it. But if the wife grabbed it or the creditor grabbed it, well, if the value of the apples was 100 and the wife only needed 50 to settle up her ketubah, then she's currently holding, 50 more than is her due, right? She's got 50 extra units of value, shekels, zuzim, whatever, that don't belong to her. So then the question is, who does it go to? Right? If the creditor took it and he's got 50 extra, does he give it to the wife? Does he give it to the heirs? If the wife took it and she has extra, does she give it to the creditors? Does she give it to the heirs? That's the tension we have in this situation. That make sense?
So if you're the wife, you want to collect, assuming you have kids with the dead husband, you want to collect as many apples as possible, right?
You always want to collect as much as you can if you're unsure of whether you're going to be taken care of. But that's why you want to be sure you'll be taken care of.
If you go over the ketubah amount, then the remainder of the apples will go to your heirs, and the creditors.
We haven't established that yet. Right?
Assuming the kids are your kids.
Assuming the kids are your kids, that is one potential option. But we haven't established yet how we decide what to do with the balance. So remember our Mishnah 1, we were trying to decide what to do with his estate's movable property. Now we're actually dealing with value that is in the hands of someone, not floating in the hands of the estate. How do we distribute that extra value among the other people who have a right to his property? And Rabbi Tarfon says,
It should be given to the one who is under the greatest disadvantage.
sounds familiar. Rabbi Tarfon is consistent. And Rabbi Akiva says,
We do not show mercy in a matter of law. Rather, it shall be given to the heirs, for whereas all the others must take an oath, and the heirs need not take any oath.
okay, again, it's technically their property. It's kind of different special case because of it being detached from the ground, and therefore it is sort of up for grabs among all the other creditors. But it is first and foremost their property, and therefore they don't have to swear to it, whereas the other two do have to make oaths. And that means that whoever grabs the original, they can keep what they are owed, but the remainder needs to go to the heirs. And the reason why we had to do this as a second Mishnah rather than just saying, it's just like the last one, is because you might have thought that this detached produce, because it is first come, first served, and once it's in the hands of someone not the husband or his estate, that maybe the answer of how we divide it would be different. But no, they both believe that the principle should be the same.
What happens to the creditors are the workers that they collect, let's say, the wheat, okay?
Right.
And no one is in the field, okay, when he passed away.
Mm-hmm.
So the workers know exactly the amount, they take as much as they want. No one else can know exactly how much they are, because they are the workers, they are collecting. How can I do something? How can I know exactly how much they took?
Welcome to the Beit Din. Welcome to the court, right? So if the workers go into the field because they just heard that the owner of the field died, and they said, "Oh, well, he hasn't paid us our wages for the week,
Exactly.
and we're owed $5, and $5 is equal to 5 bags. So we'll take our 5 bags and go," right? So then, if there was a dispute, if the heirs said, no, they took too much, or the wife says, hey, I haven't been paid my ketubot, maybe they took too much, then there would be a court case. And they would have to swear that they took the right amount. You would then have to say, well, how much did the field normally produce? How much is missing? You would have to go into all the minutiae to try and prove whether they took too much, too little, or what was going on, if there were any shenanigans or anything else. That's how court cases happen, and that's how people end up hating each other.
No, because it's very difficult for them, because they can play well. This year produce more because the weather here there. So it's like they are in the field, so they know better than anyone else what's going on, what's the reality. And they say that it should be very difficult for the heirs and the wife to really to know if they didn't take too much.
It would be difficult, which is why you would end up at a court case if there was any suspicion that there was a problem, and then the court would do the best it can to try and untangle what had gone on. Which is why, once again, it's best to communicate, to compromise, to cooperate, and not take things to the court, right? So if the workers know that this has happened, they can come to the heirs and to the wife and say, look, we've got to feed our families, so we're going to take X amount because that's the equivalent of our wages, and we'll call it even. And for the wife and the heirs to say, yes, that seems fair, or how about this instead, and to work it out before anything happens, rather than each person just doing what they feel like. Because if you just do what you feel like, chances are someone else is going to feel different. And when two people have two different feelings, it ends up in court when it's about money. It's the unfortunate history of our people. And by people, I mean the human race. All right, Ketubot 9:4. Oh, yes. Now we're getting into this topic. Sorry. Sometimes I forget when I was reviewing when we move into different topics in the chapter. But this is a fun one.
I'm gonna try.
Go for it.
If a husband set up his wife as a shopkeeper or appointed her guardian, he may impose upon her an oath whenever he wants.
Okay, this doesn't sound as bad. This isn't as bad as it sounds. So let's imagine that that Natan and I want to go into business together, right? And he's going to run the shop, and I'm going to invest money, and we're going to share the profits. But he's going to be there 5 days a week. I'll be there 1 day a week, and I'll be the buyer out in the field. He'll be the person in the storefront, whatever. Okay, great. But after a couple months, I think the cash drawer is looking a little light. Well, technically, there's no way to know that he stole or didn't steal because I wasn't watching him. There weren't two witnesses to see if he stole anything. And unless there's something funny in the books, that there's no way for me to know that he wasn't just sticking extra money in his pocket. So what can I do? I can go to him and say, I need you to swear in front of the court that you haven't touched any of the profits, right? That you have been fair and honest in all your dealings. And as a partner, I'm allowed to do that. And he's allowed to do that to me. That we can force each other to take oaths whenever we think it's necessary to prove to each other that we're okay, that we've been honest. Now, is this a great business partnership? It's better to work with someone that you don't think you need to always take oaths. But on the other hand, it's also better to continue a partnership if it's working, even if you need the extra reminder. So the question here is, if a man establishes his wife as the shopkeeper in the business, right? He's the guy making pots down the river, and she's the one selling them in the marketplace or something like that. Can he make her take an oath in the same way that he would make another person who was his partner take an oath? And the answer is, yep. Again, not sure what that's going to do for your relationship, but technically he is allowed to make her take the oaths the same way that he would any other business partner. And the same if he's made her an administrator or guardian of some piece of property or some other piece of his estate. So yes, that principle does apply to her as well. Rabbi Eliezer is going to add a little twist to it, though.
Even in respect of her kingdom and her dough.
All right, so the spindle and the dough are the two basic things that, as we saw a couple chapters ago, were sort of the standard activities that a woman was expected to do in order to contribute to the household, right? She was making the bread, she was making the wool, the thread. But maybe, says Rabbi Eliezer, when she's making the bread, she's keeping a little extra, not for the challah that's meant to go for the Kohen, but keeping it extra and building up another loaf and selling that on the own and keeping the money herself. Or maybe when she's spinning the yarn, she's keeping a little extra wool, and then she makes that extra yarn for herself, and she sells that and keeps the money for herself. And so Rabbi Eliezer was saying, a husband is even allowed to make her swear that she didn't misappropriate the household activity funds that she was normally in use with. Even though he wasn't appointing her to do this, he is still in a position to force her to swear that she wasn't cheating. Like I said, this is not the majority opinion. This is a singular voice.
Can a wife buy land? She received money from whatever reason. She decided to buy the land. If she buys the land, it's the same rules that we saw before.
Yes.
That the owner, the husband, is the owner of the land, and she.
She's
the
owner.
owner, and he can usufruct the land.
Exactly. He gets the dividends. She technically still owns the land.
If she receives cash and she dies,
Right. The cash is turned into land.
Yeah.
Right. That is the same style.
Same.
Yeah.
Okay.
We good? Okay. 9-5. Zero, you want to?
No.
No.
If he, the husband, goes to tell his wife, has no claim upon you for either a vow or an oath, he cannot make her swear on an oath.
Okay. So just like in the last one, where we saw that he had the right to make her take an oath, he also has the right to make an oath that he won't make her take an oath.
Inception.
Yeah, there's a little inception here, right? But so it's basically saying, now that we know he has the right, he also has the right to give up his right. Does that make sense? Right? We all know in American, you have the right to remain silent if you choose to give up this right. That's what we're talking about here, right? He has the right to make her take an oath, but he also has the power to give up that right to make her take an oath. And you might imagine that she might have made it a precondition, either for when they got married or later on, that, well, if you want me to run the shop, I'm not going to have you looking over my shoulder constantly wondering whether I took a couple extra kopecks. You need to swear that you won't make me swear that I'm not cheating. Family relations, yes. The stuff of stories. All right. However,
he may make her hers, and upon those who have done business with her, swear an oath.
okay, but he's only giving up his right to make her swear the oath. He's not giving up his right to make her heirs swear an oath, right? If he thinks that there was something inappropriate being done, or the people she does business with, right? So she says, yeah, I sold the pot to Mr. Cohen for 500 shekels. And he goes to Mr. Cohen and says, will you swear that you bought the pot for 500 shekels? And Mr. Cohen can be forced to go to court to swear that indeed that is the business deal that was done. And if it was actually 600 shekels and she kept the extra 100 for herself, then there's going to be some disagreement within the household. Does that make sense? Right? So he can't, if he swears that he won't make her swear an oath, he can't make her swear an oath, but he can make other people who might be connected in a secondary or tertiary capacity to swear an oath. But there's always a but.
Say if Mr. Cohen says I actually paid 600 to it, I think isn't there something about burden shifting where if he says enough that would make that shift the burden to her to swear that I didn't do it?
So then it would be more complicated, but it wouldn't be a question of getting her to swear that she didn't do it because he's already said, I won't make you swear.
Right, but she would have to rebut that burden. She would have to swear or would stand that she stole it.
There would have to be some other way of giving proof or testimony. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, because, Could always be that Mr. Cohen was lying just to stir up trouble in the family. It has been known to happen. All right, but let's change the dialogue a little bit. Part 2.
If he wrote, I have no claim upon you for either a vow or an oath, nor upon your heirs, nor upon those who have done business with you. He may not impose an oath either upon her, or upon her heirs, or upon those who have done business
With her
with her.
would be the correct English. Okay, so once again, just like our first Mishnah that we had this evening, if he writes it carefully enough, he can give up his right to make the heirs or the other people she did business with swear an oath. So he can cover a broader field if that's what he makes as his initial statement. But if he doesn't, then the assumption is that that it's as narrow as possible. Right? The default is you can make anyone swear an oath. If you give up your right to make one person swear an oath, it doesn't affect everyone else. If you mention them, then it does affect your right to make them swear as well. Pretty straightforward now that we've got this pattern down, right?
Those other people that she did business with can voluntarily swear the oath.
They can voluntarily give whatever testimony they want, but it's not as admissible and it can't be done under compulsion as a legal act. I mean, he can't force them to do so. Okay. However,
However, his heirs may impose an oath upon her, or upon her heirs, or upon those who have done business with her.
okay, because what did he say? I won't do it. But my estate, well, when I'm dead and they're checking the books and it looks like you and Mr. Cohen have been doing a black market pottery business, they absolutely can drag you before the court and make you swear. And you can't say, well, but your father said that he would never make me swear. It's like, yeah, Dad said that, we didn't. Right? So her heirs can make her swear, or her heirs swear, or the people she did business with to swear. Right? Unless, part 3.
Part 3. If he wrote, neither I nor my heirs, nor those who have done business with me, shall have any claim upon you or upon your heirs, or upon those who have done business with you, for either a vow or an oath. Neither he nor his heirs, nor those who have done business with him may impose an oath either upon her, or upon her heirs, or upon those who have done business with him.
Okay. There's an idiom that's found in England. My wife's British, so I've picked it up as well, which is, it does what it says on the tin, which basically the claim is what it is. So if it says, I won't make you swear, I won't make you swear. Everything else is still open. If I say, I won't make you or the people you do business with swear, then I won't make you or the people you do business with swear. My heirs may still do it, and that is, expensive. But if I say I and my heirs, not on you, not on your heirs, not on people who do business, then I covered all of that. It does what it says.
How is he able to get rid of someone else's right against their heirs' right?
He's giving up the right of his estate, not giving up their right. Right? He is saying his estate is excusing this, or not excusing this, foregoing this legal right to manage its own affairs, of forcing someone to take an oath, and his heirs are not therefore allowed to counteract that. Additionally, the principle is that if the business deal that was entered into was done upon the condition of this kind of vow or oath, then all business done would have to be managed by it. It couldn't be managed by something that would happen after the fact. And in fact, we're going to look at, and not tonight. We're looking at, just in a second. We're going to look at that you can't make a retroactive condition, but you can make a condition from this point forward. So, for example, in this case, if she was to continue as the front person for the business and the heirs were to take over the manufacturing, our pottery business, like we were using as an analogy, the heirs could stipulate a new set of conditions and say, okay, my dad made this business deal with you, but from this point on, we absolutely have the right to make you take an oath. That going forward, they would be allowed to still impose. But during the time when she was doing business, while he was still alive, she was governed only by his oath. Does that make sense? And he can't, and the
Yeah,
heirs can't make her take an oath about that time period.
Right. Once he dies, that they can make her take an oath of anything that happens from that point on.
From that point on,
Yeah.
but they can't make her take an oath of anything that happened prior to his death because that was governed by that original agreement. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Ketubot 9:6.
If she went from her husband's grave to her father's house, or she returned to her father-in-law's house, and she did not become an administratrix, the heirs cannot impose an oath on her.
I love that translation. I've seen it a couple other places too. The administratrix, right? Administrator, if it's a woman, Old English, administratrix, right? A female administrator, because, you know, they were so rare, we had to come up with a different version for it in English. Anyway, what's going on here? Well, he dies, and the question is, how much has she fiddled with his stuff before the heirs get their hands on it? Right? It's painful, but this is something that I have actually witnessed personally, not like witness business, but have had families with this issue where there may be a spouse, often it might be a second spouse, and the children from the first spouse maybe aren't living at home or they're living further away. The parent of the children passes away, and they believe that the new spouse, the one that's not their actual parent, has handled objects in the house, right? Where did her necklace go, right? Where did that key to the safe deposit box go that Dad always said he had? Where did, you know, these things disappear to? And there can sometimes be a perception that the surviving spouse has misappropriated part of the estate that should have gone to the heirs. So this still happens all the way up to this day, unfortunately. And the question is, in Jewish law, yes, you'd be able to take her and say, do you swear that you did not touch the key, right? Or that you did not touch the bank book, or that you did not touch any of the money that was hidden under the log, whatever it might be. Do you swear? And they could force her to take an oath. Unless, says the first part of this Mishnah, unless she left the grave and went back to her family's house, meaning she didn't go into her own house again. Right?
It also means that she doesn't have money.
Exactly, right? So she clearly has not used, not touched, not been in charge of anything. And she's not even living there. So you don't need to even make her take an oath. We know she's clean. Similarly, if she goes back to her father-in-law's house, meaning there is somebody else in the house who is running things, and it's not her, you also don't get to make her take an oath, right? Because the assumption is that the father-in-law is in charge of the household. And so, yes, he is allowed to give her food, to give her whatever is needed to keep her, you know, healthy and fine. But she doesn't have to swear to anything because the father-in-law is in charge of all of that estate.
For how long she need to stay in the father's house?
Which,
For example, she went back there
right?
in order to clean her name. After a year or two, she decided to leave the place with all maybe the money or something like that, because already she's clean, no one can say anything.
So you mean she
took stuff.
She took the stuff to the grave, to the cemetery.
She took the stuff, or whatever it is, okay? Could be whatever it is.
But this, the whole point is here is that she went from the cemetery to her original home. So she didn't have time to pilfer at the house.
She did before.
So what she may or may not have touched before he died is a whole nother set of questions.
But is there any set of time that she needs to stay in one of the houses?
No. So the issue here is not, you know, exactly did she steal before he died? The question is, did she take anything she wasn't supposed to after he died? If she did it before he died, that's a whole nother can of worms. But this question is, did she touch or use anything that belonged to the orphans? Because even though they still have a living mother, assuming it is their mother, technically they are still considered to be orphans in the sense that they are inheritors of the estate that will be coming to them directly.
What about the diamonds?
What about them?
To the grave, okay, the
Right.
diamonds with her
Right.
in her cloth. From there, she go to her
Right. So
father's house. How long is the minimum that you need to stay there?
Sound like you're planning a murder mystery here.
Oh,
You always want to know exactly how much can I get away with.
It's talking about from the time of the funeral, between
Right.
the time he dies.
So
and the
what you're
funeral.
saying is that before she goes to the cemetery, she stuffs the diamonds in her pockets. And then after the cemetery, she says, bye, sorry, it's so sad, he's dead, and goes back to her house,
correct.
right? So there, to her father's house, exactly. So then you would need to have some additional evidence that she actually took them rather than they were gifts, rather than they were money that she was already entitled to for some other reason. Right? That you can't just claim she stole them. That there would need to be some proof that they were stolen.
Existed.
Yeah.
Even existed.
So she can leave the house, the father's house, after a week.
Chink, chink, chink.
Yeah, a week and start a new life.
With all of the diamonds.
No, but
Now,
if we're down,
But she still would be if she was like to disappear and all of a sudden appears in a gold Mercedes, then they absolutely would have the right to investigate to find out whether that money had been given to her before the man died. Because once he dies, the money is considered to be his children's money. And that's the big issue. He's allowed to do what he wants with the money when he's still alive. But once he's dead, it's their money immediately, right? You don't have to wait for the reading of the will or anything. It's automatically their property. So that's the question that's dealing with here. And the question is, if she didn't have an opportunity to take once he was dead, then we don't suspect her. If she had the opportunity, or if there was suspicion that she took illegitimately before he died, then we come to court and we work it out. Part two, and then we'll come up to another question.
and if she did become an administratrix, the heirs can impose an oath on her regarding the future, but they cannot impose an oath on her regarding the past.
Right. So if she takes over the household and she is now the one who is taking care of the things, she can be forced to take an oath from that point forward. Right. Yes, I swear I didn't sell that sheep. Yes, I swear I sold that pot for this amount. Right. She can be forced to make an oath for that part onward, but they can't make her swear an oath for what her dealings were before. Now, again, this is because, sorry, I should have pointed out beforehand. This is entirely because of 9.6 is a continuation of 9.5, where the husband had made this big statement of, you won't be made to take an oath. Right? It's kind of like 9.5 continued. And the heirs are allowed to create, as we just talked about before, their own new conditions for the new work she's doing, but they're not allowed to undo the conditions of what was done when she was working under her father, under her husband's original agreement.
Okay, but if he died in the morning and he's buried or the funeral is the next day, there's time there for her to get something.
But the house, first of all, would not have been empty. And second of all, in most of the times, at this time that people lived, the burial would have been usually the same day. If he died in the morning, chances were he would be buried by the afternoon. Funerals were very quick.
But that still give her some time to get ready.
And if there is a legitimate reason to believe that something has been misappropriated and taken, that was property, not arguing about whether she sold the pot for the right amount or something, but she actually stole from him during that time period, then there is grounds for going to court. But they can't second guess her business dealings during that time, or saying that she misappropriated household funds after he was dead for whatever purpose. Okay, and that is a good place to stop for tonight, because there's no way we're going to finish the rest of chapter 9 tonight. And we have another little conversation we'd like to do with a couple people at a private meeting. So this is a good time to stop. Okay. Thank you. Everybody be safe with whatever that storm brings us.